John Jones retired. Tom Aspinall never got the fight. And somehow, no one agrees on what that actually means. Some say John ducked. Some say he earned the right to choose his exit after everything he's accomplished. Others argue the UFC protected its biggest name from the one risk that didn't fit the script. But here's the uncomfortable part. All three explanations can exist at the same time. Tom Aspinall did everything the system asked of him. He stepped in when the division needed movement. He won the interim title decisively. He defended it. He stayed active while others negotiated. He didn't complain publicly. He didn't disappear. He didn't wait quietly in the shadows. He made himself unavoidable. That's what interim champions are supposed to do. Force the division to move. The UFC guaranteed it, not once, multiple times. Certainty, confidence, commitment. John Jones redirected it, not aggressively, not emotionally, strategically. He talked about legacy. He talked about super fights. He talked about options. And with every redirection, the center of gravity shifted. Months passed. Momentum cooled. The urgency faded. The conversation stopped being about when and started becoming if. Then came the announcement. And just like that, the biggest heavyweight fight in years disappeared. No injury forcing cancellation. No decisive loss inside the cage. No unification bout that settled it. Just gone. This isn't just about ducking. It's about incentives. It's about leverage. It's about what happens when legacy meets momentum. And the risk isn't symmetrical. Because when you strip away the emotion, the insults, the fan arguments, you're left with something more interesting. The greatest fighter of all time was offered a matchup that carried more downside than upside. And that changes everything. The real question was never, was John Jones afraid? The real question is much colder than that. What did he actually have to gain? And once you answer that honestly, the retirement stops looking chaotic. It starts looking calculated. To understand what happened, you have to strip the emotion out of it. No Twitter debates, no fan outrage, no ducking headlines, just sequence. John Jones returned at heavyweight and beat Cyril Gane. Fast, dominant, efficient. That win gave him something powerful, not just the belt. Authority. He wasn't just champion. He was the greatest fighter of all time, holding the heavyweight title. Then came the Stipe fight announcement. Not Tom Aspinall, not the interim contender. Stipe. On paper, it made sense. Legacy versus legacy. Greatest of all time versus greatest heavyweight. But timing matters. While Jones prepared for Stipe, Tom Aspinall knocked out Sergey Pavlovich and won the interim title. Now the division had two champions, one undisputed, one interim. That's supposed to create urgency. It didn't. The UFC stayed committed to Jones versus Stipe. Then Jones got injured, 9 months out. Aspinall stayed active. He defended the interim belt. He did exactly what interim champions are supposed to do. And still, the unification didn't happen. By the time Jones returned and beat Stipe, the pressure had shifted. The fight fans wanted wasn't Stipe anymore. It was Jones versus Aspinall. Youth versus legacy, speed versus IQ, momentum versus history. And that's when the equation changed. Because now this wasn't about defending a belt, it was about risking a legacy. Then came the retirement. No unification, no loss, no closure, just exit. Strip the emotion away. Forget social media. Forget the word duck. Ask a colder question. What did John Jones actually risk by fighting Tom Aspinall? Not physically, strategically. If he wins, he beats a young interim champion. Impressive, but expected. Because when you are widely considered the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, expectations are unfair. Victory confirms the myth. It doesn't elevate it. Now flip it. If he loses, the story changes permanently. Not just John lost, but John lost at heavyweight. The final chapter. The era meant to cement greatness across divisions. Heavyweight wasn't supposed to be a gamble. It was supposed to be validation. Beating Cyril Gane established authority. Beating Stipe established legacy continuity. But beating Aspinall? That wouldn't complete the story. It would challenge it. Because Aspinall isn't a slow, aging heavyweight. He's fast. He's explosive. He closes distance differently. He recovers differently, he finishes quickly. That profile creates asymmetrical risk. For Aspinall, beating John Jones changes everything. For Jones, beating Aspinall confirms what many already believe, that he's elite. That's not equal exchange. Like, this isn't fear, it's leverage management. Throughout his career, John Jones has rarely taken fights where the downside outweighed the upside. He negotiates carefully. He returns when timing aligns. He protects positioning. That's not cowardice. That's career intelligence. And here's the part people don't like to admit. When you've already secured your place in history, you don't fight for validation. You fight for preservation. Tom Aspinall represented something new. Unpredictable speed, short notice composure, youthful reaction time. And youth is different. Youth doesn't negotiate with legacy. It replaces it. This wasn't just a title defense. It was a generational handoff opportunity. And generational handoffs are brutal. They don't just crown someone new, they redefine someone old. When you look at it through that lens, retirement starts to look less like surrender and more like control. He left undefeated at heavyweight. He left without absorbing that risk. He left with the narrative still intact. And intact narratives are powerful. Now zoom out, because this wasn't just John's decision. The UFC had leverage too, and they chose not to use it. This is a company that has stripped champions before. They've moved on when stars stalled. They've booked interim titles in weeks in other divisions. So why not here? Because heavyweight isn't governed by urgency, it's governed by scarcity. There are fewer true headliners at heavyweight, fewer proven pay-per-view anchors, fewer names that casual fans recognize instantly. John Jones isn't just a champion, he's inventory, premium inventory. And premium inventory is never rushed. If the UFC forces Jones into a high-risk fight and he loses, they don't just lose a belt holder, they lose a myth. And myths sell more than rankings. If Jones wins and retires immediately after, they still lose future leverage. Because once the risk is resolved, the question disappears. And unanswered questions drive conversation. Think about it. As long as the fight doesn't happen, it exists in potential. Would John beat Tom? Is he ducking? Is Tom the real champion? Potential keeps fans arguing. Definitive answers close debates. And closed debates don't trend. From a business standpoint, waiting wasn't catastrophic. Pay-per-views still moved. The brands still dominated. Other divisions carried activity. The cost of delay wasn't immediate, so the delay continued. Meanwhile, Aspinall stayed active, which sounds like momentum, but without unification, activity becomes maintenance. The division doesn't advance, it hovers. And hovering creates a strange effect. The interim champion fights. The undisputed champion negotiates. The fans debate. But the system doesn't force resolution. This isn't conspiracy, it's structure. Heavyweight is designed around preserving event value, not accelerating turnover. And when preservation outweighs competition, the biggest fight in the division becomes optional, not mandatory. That's the real shift. Not whether John ducked, not whether Tom deserved it, but that the system allowed the question to remain unanswered. And once a system allows that, winning stops being inevitable progress. It becomes negotiable. Tom Aspinall wasn't dangerous because he talked trash. He wasn't dangerous because of hype. He was dangerous because of style. Heavyweights traditionally slow down. They carry mass, they fatigue, they rely on power. Aspinall doesn't. He fights like a light heavyweight in a heavyweight body. Fast entries, quick hands, sharp grappling transitions. That kind of profile changes the risk equation. He isn't a slow legacy fight. He's a dynamic threat. And dynamic threats are unpredictable. For a younger champion, that's exciting. For a legacy fighter nearing the end, that's destabilizing. This wasn't just a title defense, it was a generational transfer moment. And generational transfers are brutal. They don't just crown someone new, they close someone old. John Jones didn't lose the heavyweight title, he relinquished it. But in doing so, he left a question behind. Would he have beaten Tom Aspinall? And unanswered questions are safer than definitive endings. So did John Jones avoid Tom Aspinall? Maybe, maybe not. But that isn't the most important part of this story. The more important truth is this: the system allowed it. Heavyweight doesn't force resolution, it negotiates it. In other divisions, momentum creates pressure. At heavyweight, status creates insulation. Jon Jones understood that. The UFC understood that. And Tom Aspinall had to operate inside it. This wasn't fear. It was leverage. It wasn't chaos. It was calculation. Jones protected the ending of his career. The UFC protected the value of its biggest name. And Aspinall protected the division by staying active. But here's the consequence. When the biggest fight in a division doesn't happen, authority thins. The belt becomes symbolic. And fans stop believing the rankings matter. That's the real cost. Not to Jon, not to Tom, to the idea that heavyweight crowns the best, not the most strategic. Tom Aspinall is now the undisputed champion, not because he beat Jon Jones, but because Jon stepped away. That distinction will follow this era for years, and maybe that's fitting, because heavyweight has always been the division of final chapters. But this time, the chapter didn't end with a fight. It ended with a decision. If you want MMA explained beyond outrage and fan narratives, subscribe to Cage Reality. Because sometimes the biggest fights aren't lost in the cage, they're negotiated outside of it.